Alright fellas, gather round, gather round. It's gonna be a long winter, so let's cut the shit. We need to talk about how we're actually going to get through the next 4 years. So, I actually plan on making a series of videos to explain how we're all going to try to make it by in the United States, and hopefully, if you are in a decent-ish situation, this will at least supplement how you're living. But if you're poor, like myself, then this will actually help you get by while resisting the current administration. Today's video will be about economics. You could probably tell from the title and the thumbnail. Now, if you're a person like myself, who's a little bit broke, a leftist, a furry, and a person who plays a lot of video games, things will become very expensive for you. So, I'm assuming that you're at least somewhat in my situation in the United States. Okay, so first off, let's talk about tariffs. But before we talk about the implication of the tariffs that we're going to be banging our head against the wall for pretty soon, we need to know what the definition of a tariff is. And for the most basic definition possible, a tariff is a tax imposed by a government on goods and services imported from other countries that serve to increase the price and make imports less desirable or less competitive compared to domestic goods and services. Now, here's a question that I have for everyone in my audience that lives in America. Who do you think pays the taxes on these tariffs? Okay, so I know what you're asking. Is it the government? And the answer is no. Is it large corporations importing things into the United States like Amazon? No. Is it the actual importers themselves? No. Is it the country that the tariff has imposed on it? No, not at all. Not even close, actually. The people who pay the tariff are you and me. That is who pays the tariff. Now, I know exactly what you're thinking. But Tecmo, that's unfair. Why does it work like that? Well, let me explain something. There are two things that may or may not have led to you misunderstanding what tariffs were in the first place. One, it's because our politicians constantly lie about what they mean, and two, it's because the only context in which you actually learn about tariffs in the United States is in relation to the American Revolution, and specifically the Boston Tea Party. That is the only reason in which you learn about shit like tariffs. Now, this is where you fell into the Trump trap, and maybe even a little bit of the Biden trap. You see, the point of a tariff is to not exactly impose a tax on the country that is exporting itself, but it is meant to encourage you to buy things that say made in America instead of something that says made in China. That is the point of a tariff. It is to encourage people at the bottom to buy things inside of the country and not externally. Now, if you've been living under a rock, which I don't blame you, politics can get very depressing, they can get very bloody, and they can get very just messy in general. But there are 3 countries that will be impacted on February 1st, which, mind you, is 6 days after the recording of this video. The following countries are China, Mexico, and Canada. Now, let me explain in great detail why cutting these 3 countries out of the equation for the United States is really, really bad and is probably one of the largest fucking flubs you could make if you're an American politician. Now, let's start with the 2 countries that sandwich the United States, those being Canada and Mexico. Now, Canada and Mexico typically have good relations with the United States, right? The 3 countries do work with each other on a lot of different projects and different just things in general. Sometimes Mexico is mistreated by the United States, and I'm not going to sit here and act like that's not the case. However, the 3 countries typically work with each other, especially when it comes to international trade. That is something that I need to really hone in on. We work with Canada and Mexico all the time when it comes to international trade. Both Mexico and Canada have a lot of citizens inside of the United States, and likewise with the United States having a lot of citizens and families within Canada and Mexico as well. This typically means that the three countries share a lot of interests and have a lot of tourism between each other. However, American corporations like Walmart, Target, Albertsons, Kroger, or quite frankly, any place that you can get groceries at in the United States, have a lot of products from Mexico and Canada. This is even more so the case when it comes to states along the US-Mexico border. It is much easier to find stuff sold in Mexico in American grocery stores if you live in a border state. Things like Jarritos, Conchas, imported Coca-Cola, queso ruffles, things like that. And while what I did mostly mention were directly treats, in some cases this also includes other brands of food that are typically sold in Mexico. And trust me, there's a lot. There's also a lot of produce that is directly imported from Mexico. Trust me, I live in a state that borders Mexico. This is not uncommon here. Now, let me explain something. This is not just a sort of like meek, weird, little meandering gesture as to just kind of be like, yeah, we're gonna make America's manufacturing base strong again. No. This is also directly saying fuck you to our neighbors. We're better than this. We shouldn't be doing this. All three of us are in North America. All three of us share borders. If you want my genuine take, we should have a North American Union, very similar to the European Union. We should have that, but for North America, because of how much cooperation happens between the three countries. Now, obviously, that's idealism right there, but I think you get how prescient I think this is. How much of a problem I think it is that we're trying to basically just scream, fuck you to both Mexico and Canada. It doesn't make sense. It will just hurt everyone involved. But mostly Americans. This is just gonna hurt us. Something else worth mentioning is the fact that we also get a lot of wood and paper from Canada. So if you need to get paper and wood for any reason, like if you're a carpenter or if you're a school teacher, you probably want to get those as soon as you possibly can. Okay, now we need to talk about the big one. China. China is by far the United States' largest trade partner for plenty of reasons. Vehicle parts, processing chips, steel, food, appliances, furniture, video games, plastic, and many, many other items are produced by Chinese companies or companies that own manufacturing bases and plants in China. These will now start to become exponentially more expensive. The United States relies heavily on China to both purchase our exports and for us to purchase their imports. What this will only end up doing is furthering a worse trade war that has been going on since 2018 and 2017. And the best part about all of this is that China does not have to do anything. The United States will just shoot itself in the foot repeatedly. To say that the United States is dependent on China is a complete understatement. Words can't even describe how much the United States depends on Chinese goods and services. And what makes a lot of this worse, especially in the tech sector, is the fact that Trump is also planning on repealing the CHIPS Act, which was going to make domestic chip manufacturing a lot more viable. It's very weird that, it's almost like a lot of the companies and the administration that is currently in charge will just go out of its way to capitulate with one another to bring prices up so they can make the line go up. Anyways, the Domestic Chips Act was going to make domestic chip manufacturing a lot more viable and not as outsourced. And because right now, Most semiconductors are being made in Ukraine, which is still being ravaged by Russia and North Korea. One, I don't think I need to explain why the mass slaughter of a whole bunch of people in a country is a bad thing, just in general. I think we're past the point in which I need to explain why killing people is bad. But I also need to explain the fact that most semiconductors, or at least a large chunk of semiconductors, being made in Ukraine is not exactly an ideal situation if you're trying to bolster a large tech sector in your own country. I don't think I need to explain that. Not only are a lot of them being made in Ukraine, but the bulk majority of them are also being made in Taiwan, which is not a very stable place concerning its neighbor that the United States does a lot of trade with. I'm talking about China, wanting to, at some point, possibly take Taiwan for itself because of a lot of historical reasons. Okay. Now, before I end this video with some tips, I have to say that what's going on in the United States will only make other countries rely on more stable countries like China. This administration will ravage all relations with the United States that it has built up over the years with other countries. We are getting to a point in which the United States is willing to throw away relationships. It is all hands on deck. You need to act. Okay, now for the tips that I had mentioned earlier regarding economics. Here's how you can help spread the messages while also making life easier for yourself. 1. Do not give up hope. This is not a time to give up hope. Do not go out of your way to keep criticizing the Democrats. The Democrats are irrelevant at this point. They are so irrelevant that it is not even worth talking about them. We can talk about how they led to us getting to this situation. You can blame them. I'm not saying don't blame them. I'm not saying don't criticize them. Right now, you need to criticize the fuck out of the current administration. You need to be a very annoying piece of shit. Which leads into section 2. Being a very annoying piece of shit. Always bring up the economy if a bad policy is put in place, or if people champion whatever the current administration is doing. You need to drill down hard and double down on absolutely every single thing that you say about the economy. Let me use an example with this hyperbolic random chud. Hello Chud example, which is totally not just me using a fake voice to depict a person that I don't like. Now here is something a complete fucking Chud would say. We need to repeal birthright citizenship and repeal all this woke shit like gay marriage rights. We need to whip this country back in shape and make it a Christian nation. Now, what you shouldn't respond with is, how dare you? These are core fundamental rights of the American people. How dare you say such things? We are past this fucking point. We are talking to active fucking fascists that do not care about the Constitution, that do not care about fundamental American or human rights. We need to act as dumb as they act. You need to fight fire with fire. And while obviously it's fine to think that, by the way, it's fine to sit there and actually say to yourself that these are core fundamental American rights, how dare you be such a fascist? Instead, you need to not engage with any of what he just said and respond with something along these lines. Oh, interesting. Can you explain to me how this will bring down the price of ground beef? How will this help me afford a car? Will this help you afford a car? Will the price of eggs go down if we do something like this? How will this bring down inflation? Ask these kinds of questions. There is no wrong question when it comes to the economy. You need to drill down that you are a person that only cares about the economy, or at least just act like that's the only thing you care about. Do not act like this is a sort of social justice sort of thing, because what they're going to do is they're just going to say, oh, you're woke, as opposed to actually making them maybe possibly think about how bad the economy will be, or how bad the economy is. Just ask, how will this bring down the price of my pork chops? That is what you need to start doing. Be an annoying piece of shit. You need to hone in on the fact that this was a problem that they were screaming about at one point. You need to hone in on the fact that they were screaming about inflation literally 2 weeks ago. You need to scream. You need to talk about that. You need to really drill down on that. Ask, how will this bring down inflation? How will this bring down gas prices? How will this bring down dish soap? Ask those questions. Will this make my medical bills go down? Ask those questions. Be a fucking thorn. The third thing that I can really say at this point is buy stuff ahead of time. Expect things to be very, very expensive. Expect things to be very inflationary. If you're looking to get an RTX 3080 Ti right now, or some shit like that, then you need to get it right here, right now, if you have the income. Make sure you buy a lot of non-perishable goods, like lentils, beans, rice, canned foods, frozen meat. Get that shit right now because it will be expensive in the future. Hunker down for as long as you can. Just save as much money as you possibly can and engage in some more responsible spending. My final tip is this. Protest, protest, protest. You need to be very fucking disruptive right now. You need to really shove it into the conservatives' face that the economy fucking sucks. You need to shove it into the liberals' face that the economy fucking sucks. It was a huge talking point last 4 years that a lot of conservatives in America would go out of their way to bring up inflation or anything relating to the market. You need to react in the exact same way. You need to play their game. This is what we are doing now. This is what has been going on. You need to sit down and actually really criticize the government and everything the government will fucking do. Right now, it is within the conservatives' best interest to gaslight you, to ignore the fact that basically everything that they were talking about, they'll just act like it never happened. What? Oh, the inflation thing? Yeah, it was bad under Biden, but under Trump, it's so much better. Even though it won't be. They only care about what American media and what the American president will tell them to care about at that moment in time. You cannot let them forget. You have to keep pointing it out. You have to make it very blatantly obvious. And another thing, the moment anybody mentions that the economy was good under Trump's first term, you have to weaponize that shit. You have to sit there and say, no, there was a trade war in 2018 between China. You just didn't pay attention to it because you're not in construction. You need to bring up the pandemic fear purchasing. Oh, remember when you were completely complaining about the eggs not being in stock or the toilet paper not being in stock? That wasn't just under Biden. That was also under Trump. A lot of this kind of shit happened under Trump. You need to understand, and you need to really drill down and advocate for the fact that the economy has been sucking since 2008. You need to drill this in. You need to drill in that nothing has recovered since 2008. The current administration does not like vocal opposition. You need to talk about people like Luigi Mangione. You need to talk about the fact that the economy has been in the shitter for ages. You need to basically spread as much class consciousness as possible. You need to point out that we are going to start living in an oligarchy, even though we have already been living in an oligarchy. You need to talk about how everything will just be funneled up to the top. You need to keep talking about the economy. Be the most vocal critic you can possibly be right now, because that is what the government hates. The government wants everyone to be silent on every single issue. This includes LGBTQ rights, this includes racism, this includes the economy, this includes literally anything. Right now, if you don't like it, the government loves it. You need to talk about Palestine. You need to talk about Ukraine. You need to talk about literally every single problem that is going on right now. Okay. I think I've made my case for now. Do not give up hope. Keep fighting. Get organized. Do not be silent. This has been Tecmo Snowsparks signing off. Peace.